Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Marm. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I'm a proud graduate of the Bancroft Capital Veterans Training Program. Welcome to this quarter's Patriot Lunch. We are showcasing Dr. Zachary Riley. He is a U.S. Navy Chief Warrant Officer 4. Welcome, Zach.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here, and I look forward to the dialogue.
Absolutely. For everyone, the old timers and the new timers that are online now, we're doing this Patriot Lunch as a way to have an intimate dialogue to showcase a transitioning veteran, a veteran who is going to enter into your corporate spaces. And we wanted to highlight one veteran to the corporate audience, and very glad that you're able to dial in and find the time to listen, and hopefully then later also dialogue with Zach. We succeed when relationships are made and strengthened. So I'd love to connect you with Zach after this webinar, and I encourage you to get to know him, for him to get to know who you are, your role, the industries that you are experts in, and that'll help him transition in and find that right spot where he can then go flourish and lead like he just did in the military for the last 24 years. We'll have time at the end of this, the dialogue. So please just text, raise your Zoom hand, and we'll get you in that queue. And we can have a nice time chatting and getting to know Zach. Most of you know about Bancroft Capital's special mission. We are a certified service-disabled veteran-owned small business that operates as an institutional broker-dealer and a small investment bank. Through our veteran training program, we accomplish our mission, which is to train and empower transitioning veterans to succeed in the financial services industry. Bancroft Capital takes the proceeds of the business to pay for the mission. Okay. The core lines of the business are debt and equity capital markets, public finance, fixed income, secondary trading desk, cash management, and investment banking. So please remember Bancroft Capital if you ever need these services. So as I stated, we're going to highlight and showcase Zach Riley. Please, Zach, we're grateful for you to be here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Yeah, so as Will said, my name's Zach Riley. I'm an active duty Navy right now. I've served a little over 24 years. So I'm in that last year and finishing up. So what I do in the Navy is I'm a SWCC, which is a Special Warfare Combatant Crewman. And so what we do is we operate the Navy's jet gunboats that specializes in maritime insertion and extraction, among other missions. To put it simply, everyone's heard of the U.S. Navy SEALs. We're the only other job in the Navy that's considered naval special warfare. I also hold a doctorate in executive leadership from the University of Charleston. And currently I'm stationed on John C. Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. I know it sounds a little weird. There's about 5 commands on there on this NASA base where they test spaceship rockets. There's 5 of us Navy commands down there that are on the space. So it keeps it interesting for sure.
Zach, I think it's when we were getting to know each other before this and preparing, the ships that he manages and deploys to defend our nation have these motors on them that are like rocket engines, very similar to these rocket engines. So I think it's pretty ironic that you've got rocket engines. You're at a space, center in Mississippi that are sending rockets that way, yet you've got rocket engines sending your boats that way. So I just, for an Army guy, that the power is pretty intense. And you probably find a lot of enjoyment watching those rockets go up in space and across the ocean.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So tell us, you've had a ton of experience there. Again, congrats on recently finishing up your doctoral studies in executive leadership. Love to get into that later. Tell us about yourself. How did you get into the military?
So kind of a interesting story. I actually enlisted in the Navy because I didn't like school. Actually, it was the driving factor. I wanted to see the world, do something else. So, which is kind of ironic given my academic career so far. And my intention was just to get in, see the world a little bit, enlist for only 4 years, and then after that, life started to happen. Met my wife. I've been married to for over 20 years, and kind of decided, hey, I need to support her, so I'm going to stay in. And I'm so glad that I did, because it ultimately turned into giving me a lot of structure and direction that helped me focus on my passion for leadership and what's most important to me. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah, that's
the structure that the military gives you, I can understand, then led to the structure of your doctoral studies and your passion for leadership. Talk to us about why you went and pursued the seemingly unending learning curve for those studies.
so that kind of leads me into my first kind of talk on this. Is there's a lot of influences in life that kind of shaped who I am and the person I've become. And one of the main things is in that structure and um, through that direction that it gave me, I learned that as I grew and learned more about leadership, actually I could develop this like passion for learning. And I found out that learning is addictive as I grew in rank and learned more about that, but also continued with my studies. That it just turned into, okay, I will be learning for the rest of my life. So that's kind of what would turn how they marry together and move forward.
Yeah, right. The lifelong learning. Tell us about how we were talking about your 240 Bravo story. I want to hear about that.
So as I look at this, I'm a huge component of, as we've talked about, a lifelong learner, right? I like to use a lot of quotes. The one quote that reminds me of being a lifelong learner is the quote by Eartha Kitt. I'm learning all the time, and the tombstone will be my diploma, right? And so as I talked about my path of an academic journey, high school, I got to a point where it was funny. My wife was like, "Hey, we're having kids, and I, you know, I have a degree, you don't, and we don't want to give our kids that out that, hey, look at dad, he's doing great. He doesn't need, and you don't got to go to college, right?" So I kind of laughed about it, and I went and got my degree. Again, moving forward, being that leader, and I came back. I'm good. I'm done with my associates. I came back. I got put into another boat detachment, a group of guys that I was commanding at that time, and one of my senior enlisted said, "Hey, Zach, we got a bunch of guys that are starting college, all of our junior guys. And I think to be good examples as their leaders, we should take on our bachelor's degree." And I kind of smiled and like kind of in the back of my head said, "Man, why'd you say that? Because I know you're absolutely right." So then I started my bachelor's degree. And after that, I didn't stop until I got all the way to the end, right? To now where I'm at, where there's no higher degrees. And so from that, I use that because the 240 story that you were talking about. So on our boats, we have machine gun stations. And so within that, we have this saying, you must master your 3 feet of space. You need to always be looking to improve that section as a junior person, as a junior SWIC. Some of your first jobs on there will be a gunner. Well, you've got to learn your 3 feet of space. You got to learn where you put your ammo, where you put your how you operate your gun, where you set up your tools, and you do all that. And once you master that, now you can look to help somebody next to you and then grow into them and help them to grow, right? And as it continues, it ultimately snowballs and then helps the next form of leadership to where it's now the entire troop is now leaned on each other, learn from each other, and move forward.
Yeah, it's really important to understand to have those routines, right? And to have um, you have to really understand that environment. Just for the audience, can you give us an overview of what a SWIC is? Okay, and your primary tool. This is a really special capability for the military and for the nation. And Zach is one of just a few who are so well qualified to do something that our country is the only country in the world that has this type of capability.
So for SWICs, to put it into perspective, across the Navy, there's only about 800 of us total for that job in the Navy. And then on top of that, SWIC warrant officers, what I do, there's less than 50 of SWIC warrant officers across the entire Navy. And so essentially we operate a few different types of craft. You can Google them. You got your combat craft medium, your combat craft assault, which is a smaller one, and then your combat craft heavy. And they do a different, we're almost like a jack of trades. We operate that, we insert, we collect, reconnaissance, and we also have a capability where we take our boats, we throw them off the back of airplanes, and then our guys jump out after them, to just kind of show you the broad spectrum of things we do.
Yeah, you're being super humble. Listen, everyone, he is trained to chuck, and this is the official doctrinal term, chuck boats out of an aircraft thousands of feet in the air above the air, the water. Those things land, and then they skydive, like swan dive, right, with parachutes into the water, get these craft up and operational, right? Stick the guns on them, put all the ammo and the radios and everything into operations in the middle of the ocean. Okay. I personally feel that that is one of the most astounding features. And of course, on top of that, the combatant crafts, small, medium, heavy, think, stealth boats, right? That don't make a lot of noise, move really fast. Nobody can see until Zach Riley's looking at you really, really, really closely.
Yeah, it's too late, right?
We'll get into that. Talk to me about you had a comment about perspectives and ideas and how this applies to your trade, and talk to me about that, marrying your ideas.
So when I look at that, important for, I know leveraging diversity has a lot of different meanings and contexts, but for me, diversity is huge in the fact that I like to look at diversity of thought and diversity of experience as being a huge tool that I use in the military, because I'm so fortunate that everyone that I work with, either with, for, have come from a different background that we can leverage together to be stronger, right? And I love that quote by Malcolm Forbes. Diversity is the art of thinking independently together. And so when I look at that, one thing I've always been told, it's important that your ideas are great, but you should just date them, don't marry them, because oftentimes someone's going to have a better idea, or collectively, that you can get rid of and go forward, right? For that. So in fact, I actually got a great story about leveraging diversity that, if you don't mind, sharing.
Yeah.
So we were deployed somewhere in Asia. I don't want to talk about the actual location. I can't say, just because it hasn't been declassified yet. But we were on this area. We're on the boats. Think wintertime, massive sea state. We're heading out on the boats. We're heading to this island. This island is, the host country wants us there, but within an eye shot over the horizon is one of our biggest adversaries to our nation. And so it was very kind of pins and needles going there. So we're heading there. It's some of the biggest sea states. I remember launching off this wave in our combat craft medium. We had launched so high that we all looked at each other, had enough time to blurt out a cuss word, and then we hit, right? And everyone's like, "Hey, is everyone okay?" Everyone's like, "Yeah," we laughed. A part of our boat actually broke, like in the seating boat. Our guys had to drive. We pulled, and we found out that we had lost complete oil pressure. So we're sitting there pierside. The only way we could use a bracket was broken off our boat. We're sitting in there. Now I'm like, man, great. I'm sitting where we're only supposed to be there for like 12 hours and be gone. And we're within eye shot. There's people on the island that are sympathetic to our adversaries. And so we're like, we don't leave the base, and we sit there. And then the next day after we woke up, I come walking down because we're like, hey, we need to get a welder out here to weld this. We had the welding equipment, but we didn't have the actual welder itself, or the guy to do it. So I'm looking over at some of my junior guys and I'm like, what are they doing over there? As I'm walking down the boats, racking my brain, what are we going to do? And as we're walking down, I look at them and they're kind of huddled around this iPhone and they're looking at it. And I'm like, hey guys, what are you doing? And they're like, nothing, sir. And I'm like, no, let me see. What do you guys got? And they're like, well, can we try something? And I'm like, hey, absolutely. Tell me what you got. And they're like, well, our buddy, our engineer, he welds a little bit. He's been welding like for a year in his backyard in old junkyard cars, and they're on YouTube trying to figure out how to use this welder. And I'm like, okay, well you know what? Let's give it a try. You guys are doing. I love the forethought. Let's do this. And so they went in there instead of waiting the 9 hours half day, we'd be there another day. They broke out the welder. They started looking at it, and they welded it. And I'm like, okay, let's go do this. And we were able to leave like almost a half day earlier. We got out, took some more big sea states and made it and limped all the way back. And we got back onto the main place we were going, you know. And I just sat back and kind of reflected on that, like, wow, if we would have just sat there and accepted our fate, not reached out or been open to someone else's perspective on, hey, let's not take this risk. Like, no, let's try this. Why not? And then go. And it ended up being fantastic. And we were able to do that because we leverage everyone's experiences, you know, and their abilities. And then the funny thing is, after he got back, he's like, hey, can I have that mount? I want to keep that as a trophy because I welded that after we replaced it. And I was like, no, absolutely. That is going to be a great, you know, sea story later on.
That's it goes on the going away plaque or the wall of fame.
Absolutely.
So the story, listening to that story, you're broke. You're in a place you're not really supposed to be in, not friendly country. You got to get something fixed, but you don't have the right guy, the right resources, but you figured it out, right? You got it done. That type of outside the box thinking, managing risk, that's required and will allow you to thrive in any industry, job, function. What I heard was managing risk, empowering your team, your teammates to take that extra little step. Obviously, you're bouncing that off of timelines, as well as just primarily thinking outside the box. So well done on that. That set a great example for your team and obviously accomplish the mission, right? Mission first, and always, people always. So that's really great. Let's get to the actual craft, right? So the Navy's going to, is it a ship or a boat? I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Hey, none offense taken. So actually, these are all boats.
Okay.
They're boats. No problem at all. I believe the actual definition of a ship is something that without it on its own power can cross the entire ocean,
Okay.
with some sort of life-sustaining ability. We could do it on our boats, but we probably wouldn't be very happy when we got all the way across the ocean.
Okay. So the way I heard that definition is if Zach can paddle it to shore, it's a boat.
Yeah.
That's great. But it's not just a boat, right? Like, and what I want our folks in the audience to understand is that this is a boat with a lot of weaponry and a lot of everything from sights, night vision, gun sights, heat, thermals, whatever, all those different things. Having been on them a couple times in places I probably shouldn't have been, and yours are upgraded now too. Can you just give us about the firepower and the techniques and procedures you have to perfect to operate these cleanly and effectively, and how communication gets into that? I'd love to hear about that.
Gee, thank you for bringing that up, because so there's two arenas that we really specialize in. You've got the coastal side, which is open ocean, which is the high tech, the more high speed boats that are modern, coming out within the last 10 years. that only have a couple of weapon stations, but the ones Will's referring to are Riverine Force. They are on the Special Operations Craft Riverine, which is it's called the SOC-R, and on each one of those boats, there's 5 heavy weapon stations. So think 50 cals, GAU 17s, like the Gatling gun, and Predator, that gun that Jesse Ventura hip shoots, that shoots all those rounds, and then grenade launchers, all of that. Well, in a SOC-R kinetic troop, the one that Will's referring to, the ones that he operated on, there is 4 boats per package. So you've got 20 heavy weapon systems, and it's one way in, one way out on the river. So we have to be armed to the teeth, because in the coastal you can use speed to get away. In the riverine, you gotta slug it out to get out. And so to give you some perspective on that, the GAU on the front, we don't put targets on trees, because that GAU will actually shoot through the tree, and the tree will actually fall in the river on top of us potentially. So that's why we don't do that. And my one workup where I was in the Riverine troop, we expended 1.7 million rounds of ammunition just in that 6-month period to train to the level that we needed to get to with our weapons. So that kind of gives you some context of what you need to train to.
Yeah, and just this is the Army guy talking, because Army guys don't normally pull that trigger and hold it down. But from what I remember, like the SOC-R, you can squeeze that trigger and it can go forever for a long time. Am I right?
Yeah. Oftentimes guys on the nighttime under night vision, that gunner that's on that gun, he'll pull the trigger a little too long, and the boat captain, it's electrical, and they'll cut the power because it's blind. The fire off the end of that barrel like blinds everybody in night vision. So it's kind of a funny relationship that's between the trash talking, hey man, stop shooting so much, and hey, I can't see, I'm gonna crash the boat. And then while that's all arguing is happening, we're in the middle of a simulated firefight. So yeah, it's a bunch of good fun.
Yeah, yeah. So so it's like a giant porcupine of weaponry, carrying, and employing the best trained force in our nation. It takes a lot of communication. You're also trained to jump out of airplanes and follow these boats down to the ground. Talk us through some of your airborne jump master stories and how communication plays into that.
So kind of the pre to why this is my story about jumping out of airplanes. I love that quote by Stephen R. Covey, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And as I look at that, we talk about in the military why it's so important to explain the why, how you frame your information, like understanding the social cues for understanding from our people. And why it's so important in communication to explain the why is in this jump master story. I remember we were on a big C-130. It's not the biggest, but it's got 4 engines on the outside. It's got you jump out the tail on the back end of it. And so we're doing this practice jump. We're sitting up there. It's super loud, and it's like, you can hardly hear anything. And I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden I noticed all of the airplane crew and our jump master. The jump master, just so you know, is the person on the airplane that's qualified, that when they look out by judging the speeds, the winds, the calculations, they know when to throw you out of the airplane so that you can actually make it back to the drop zone where you're supposed to land, right? There's a couple things that are guaranteed when you jump out of an airplane. One, once you leave, you're going to hit the ground, but is it in the right spot and at the right speed, right? And the speed's probably more important than in the right location. So they're all getting together. I noticed the jump, they're almost like arms, like it's a huddle, like a football break in the middle. And I'm kind of like looking at the other guys, and we're looking at each other like, that never happens. Something's not right. And all of a sudden we notice the back of the airplane starts to open, and I'm sitting there. And all of a sudden the jump master comes back, who's now a warrant officer. He's like the head warrant officer for our entire community. He goes, hey, the plane is, expletive. The plane's messed up. We have 2 options. We're either going to jump out of the airplane now, everybody, or we're going to ride this messed up plane back to where we're landing. He goes, well, guess what? I made a decision to everybody. 30 seconds, we're all getting out of this airplane, and we're like, oh, okay, that's fair. But you have to understand that what makes it kind of complex and kind of crazy is when we jump out, normally it's in 5 people at a time. Well, we have like 17 people in this airplane. So when he says, hey, go, and we're all just in a line, just getting out of this airplane like it's on fire, right? They leave, airplane takes off, but now we have 17 of us who are now under canopy. So now we're all trying to navigate with each other with 7. It almost looked like a bee swarm in the air. We're all trying to like make sure we're not hitting each other, and that's all bad. And so we finally turn, and as we're coming back in, I remember looking down and being like, okay, I'm reading this T. It's like an indicator that tells you which direction you're supposed to land. Because if you go the right way, you're going against the wind, and you can it slows you down naturally because the parachute flies at about 24 miles an hour in one direction. So if you have a 10 knots coming this way and you fly into it, you're only going like a part of the speed. But if you go the wrong way, now you add that 10 miles an hour to like the 24 that you're already going. So now you're going like 35 miles an hour. And so we're coming in, we're landing, and I turn on final, which is the last turn before you come into land. And I noticed every single person is landing the other direction. And I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like, I look down, I'm reading, I did the indicator, everything's right. Okay, this is gonna hurt. So I'm about 10 feet above. My feet are running as fast as I can go. So I'm like, I need a head start, right? So I'm running, I hit the ground, I'm running about 10 feet. I'm like, I got this. And then I hit and slipped on the wet grass, and I slid. Like, imagine sliding into second base, but instead of 90 feet, it's like 150 feet. I'm just like sliding and sliding. I get up, I look like a football player with like, I got dirt in my helmet, I've got all over me. The jump master runs out and yells at me, and I'm like, okay, yeah. I read the T on the ground that said that's the way you land. And then the 2 lessons that I ultimately pull from that is, one, I didn't question the jump master going out because he has always explained the why. So in those times when you don't have to, I knew what he said was probably right. I'm going to trust him and go off that airplane. The next lesson that I learned from that jump was that I saw this. How many times you seen that wind the indicator on the ground, and it's like, hey, this is the right way to go. But if you look at your surroundings, trees, flags blowing, telling you the right way the wind was blowing, I could have probably figured that out, but I didn't. So I didn't listen to what the earth was communicating to me through the winds. And so I made that mistake and landed in the wrong direction, which made for a funny story later on after I was done getting yelled at by everybody on the drop zone. But still a good story, you know.
Yeah, I guess if you can get up and walk away from it, it's a good story.
Yeah.
And I think we've all had some of those stories. You wrote, you basically, I wrote down here, trust your training, right? You were trained that, and sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And also read the tea leaves, not necessarily tea leaves, maybe just tree leaves, but read the tea leaves. And then earlier you were talking about seeking to understand and explaining the why and those social cues. There's a connection there, right? So the social cues with the environmental cues, and and um, and good thing you're able to walk away from that. We've all had those awesome landing experiences that take you a lot farther and in different directions than you ever expected. And good thing you're able to get up and keep moving and walking and turn that into a good story and a good explanation.
So a quote from Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. Yeah, I probably should have figured that out on the way in.
Yeah, but jumping out of airplanes requires teamwork, right? I mean, is somebody you had to suit yourself up? You got checked by somebody, a jump master. You get on. I mean, it's one giant evolving, process between who's in charge, who's doing what they're supposed to be doing or not doing it, and then getting out of the airplane and then getting down to the ground. Can you talk to us the value of teamwork, how you've seen it in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think the example that you just gave about jump operations, when you start in the very beginning, you have to pack your own parachute, which is kind of scary when I think about it myself, right? But in that, you have those professionals that help you double and triple check you, that you put it on the parachute. Well, you have 2 checks to make sure that you've been checked by a professional that you put it on right, even though this is your 100th or your 1000th time. It doesn't matter. It's always going through and checking. You need the guy that's in the airplane telling you which time to get out. You have the pilots that are flying the airplane to make sure they're going the right speed. To everyone has to lean on each other to make sure everything is proper. And so yeah, it's funny. I have kind of an interesting story, a quick one about the value of teamwork, like you talked about. Um, it's kind of like an amalgamation of teamwork and the leveraging the diversity. I remember we were in Kenya, Africa, doing a training event with. Um, they had the wildlife group there, almost like wildlife officers like DNR. You had a police force, and then you had a Coast Guard force, and all of them hated each other because they were always competing for resources within that country. Well, if the Coast Guard gets all the money for boats, well, that means nobody else is getting any money for anything else, right? And so we trained with them, and it was just a struggle getting these people to work together. They'd never work together, teamwork. Well, it got down to the last thing we were doing was we were boarding vessels around there, which they had the authority to do. And all of them have unique authorities. You can get on the boat because of the Coast Guard. If you can make an arrest if you have the police, but the Coast Guard can't arrest, right? So they all have these special niche authorities within that country. Well, on that last mission, we went in. Well, no, I shouldn't say mission training. We were boarding out there. We boarded this vessel, so we got on, and they're feeling good. The Coast Guard, like, yeah, we got on here. And then it just so happens that the people had drugs on them. So now everyone's like, well, we couldn't, the police could arrest them, right? And I'm thinking, okay, great. We're laughing, kind of sitting there like, okay, well, it stinks the wildlife people didn't get a chance to get in the action to show their what they contribute to the team. And lo and behold, I can't make this up, the guys on the boats for lunch were actually boiling a endangered species turtle. So now the wildlife DNR got in and could say, hey, now we can help build on that. And then I think I'd like to assume, or they played it really well. They're like, wow, we could get here because of you. We could do something about it because of you and you. And without us separately, we couldn't have done that. Of course, I'm sure they were happy, and then they probably went their own directions. But I mean, that's kind of that comes to mind when I think about working together and leveraging all that together. But
That's so did you say they were boiling in an
yes,
endangered species?
yes, they were cooking a species of sea turtle that was endangered in that region. Yes. I mean, it's Africa. If you're hungry, you're hungry. You'll eat anything, right? I guess.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's so like sea turtle soup, like there's a boiling a frog line in there somewhere, just not right now. Anyways, um well, good. Yeah, wow. Okay. So obviously value teamwork, cobbling together, capabilities, authorities, who can do what. Obviously there's collective effort and direction there. Um, try to build efficiencies, trust, obviously learning opportunities. Really, really great. You've had a remarkable career. Really exceptional uh, experiences, learning. Very briefly, if you had the top one or two experiences that you're going to walk away from your career with, 24 years, you look back and you tell your wife, "Hey, I'm really glad I did this and did that." What would that be?
I would say for our family collectively, it would be, well, actually, first and foremost, a chance to serve my nation, the greatest country on this earth. Um, Secondly, I'd say I'd be so thankful for the military because it actually afforded us the opportunity to actually live abroad in Germany. So there's some things that we would never get to do, like vacation in 17 different countries, allow my children the opportunity to experience other cultures so that they're better rounded as young adults. And then I think third is just understanding the value of service to others, I think is very important. Probably my big three.
That's wonderful. So as you're transitioning and you're looking at industries and locations and researching what's out there, what are you thinking? You know, where are you, where do you feel the gravitational pull is? Where's that jet engine pushing you to?
Well, it's funny because as being a learner, I want to, it's like when they, hey, what do you want to do? Well, I want to do everything, right? So I think right now to kind of narrow that, that little bit, I think I'm still in that exploration phase and researching what's out there. I'm actually having a lot of fun just learning what's about there by as many countries and as many companies and as many industries as I can learn about because I don't know what I don't know. And, but I do envision myself, joining an organization where I can use my value proposition as a team builder, problem solver, and legacy builder. And I feel like I'm at my best when I have the autonomy to develop, winning teams for organizations and their human capital. Is kind of how I envision wherever I go next. That's what I bring.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. We're going to open it up to dialogue from the audience. So if there are any people, you can text me or just jump on. It's a hot what do you call it? Open mic or hot mic. And if does anybody have any dialogue questions that they would like to ask Zach? Go ahead, please, Cal.
Will, I'll jump in if you don't mind real quick.
Go for it.
First, Zach, thank you so much for your service to our country. It's great to have a Navy guy on here. We do too much with the Army guys. It's incredible the bias we have, so it's nice to have a Navy squiddly with us. If you can share a little bit more about kind of your professional aspirations, where do you think you play specifically in kind of a role and a career path industry? Give me a sense of what you're looking forward to, what your interests are, how you think your skill set applies as you kind of open this next chapter in your life in a civilian career.
Thank you for the kind words, and also thank you for the question. So where I see kind of moving forward, I see myself. One, I look at it as I see me focusing on a lot of I see academia is a part of it. I see focusing in joining like an organization within like the tech industry or some other one that I don't know about. That's where I'm kind of looking at is like when I say I'm really looking and learning, I'm really looking and learning at everything. I think if I could say that to narrow it down to not give you such a vague answer, I'd say academia, a leadership role or consulting, or the tech industry is probably the big three that's I'm leaning towards now. But that could change by lunch if I meet the right person from a company that has the right culture that I'd love to be a part of.
That's great. I think you demonstrated you're a life learner, right?
Yep.
And committed to the process of learning as you go through life. There's the opportunity to kind of grow in any industry and field. Maybe I'll shift my focus to this. What is most important to you? As you look yourself 5 years from now, what is your priority? What is most important in kind of where you find yourself 5 years from now? Is it geographic location? Is it intellectual curiosity and adding a higher level of expertise in a certain area? Is it geographical presence because you need your kids to stay in school in the school district they're at? Or what is your priority in kind of 5 years from now? How does your priority align with where you find yourself?
Thank you. I understand the context. Thank you for that. Well, first off, I've got 3 boys. So I got one that's graduating next year, and I've got one that's just becoming a freshman. So we foresee ourselves being here in the New Orleans area or the greater New Orleans region for probably at least the next 5 years, for sure. So that puts me as like, hey, I may looking at okay, then maybe it's remotely or maybe it's something here as where I see myself. But to answer your question, I see myself definitely. I look for an organization that will give me the autonomy to make decisions out of service to that organization to help lead. That's like when you talk about hey, what blows your hair back? Me helping others strive for to reach their fullest potential is what I really, really enjoy.
Zach, that that question is a double entendre. You don't have any hair. But metaphorically,
Facts.
I understand what you're saying here.
Yeah, no, facts.
Thanks, Cal. We have a question from Dave, please. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Zach, first, thanks so much for your service. I was not in the military, but I am an Air Force brat. Up until I retired 5 years ago, I spent 40 years in a manufacturing supply chain role. A dozen of that in aerospace, so I know a little bit about airplanes. My question, well, and I will tell you this, I'll admit in front of this audience now that I'm retired, it doesn't matter, but even though I'm not supposed to say so, I tended to have a bias towards people with a military background when I hired. And the reason for that is my experience with people who had been in the military is that they quick on their feet, all about the mission, able to synthesize minimal amounts of information to reach a reasonable conclusion and a forward-looking solution to a problem. So that was my experience. But the other part of my experience was that oftentimes people that had been career military or had a long stint in the military would come into the organization, which was obviously not the military, and try to apply military leadership techniques to a private sector environment. And they would get kind of caught up in that and frustrated by the fact that the same skills, the basic skills might apply, but the application might be different. So how do you see that moving forward as you get ready to leave your military career and go into the private sector?
Thank you for that question. Dave, I've definitely looked at that a lot of times and reflected on that. And I think it's important to understand that when we leave the military, or sometimes looking at it, is you almost have to shed the difference between being a military member and actually becoming that civilian, right? I know a lot of people, they stay tied to that. I've been in the military longer than the most of my adult life. I think I've been in now longer in the military than I've been actually a civilian. So I think it's important to realize that yes, some of those applications of punctuality and some of the ways that we think outside the box, that's great. But I have to separate myself, as the military is what shaped and formed me as a military, but it's not what defines me. So it's taking those lessons that I've learned in those unique situations and now reframing it, repackaging it so that it aligns and resonates with the civilian population or the civilian company, whatever you go into. So I think I have to be very aware. I don't want to be that guy that's like, every story starts with, well, when I was in the Navy, because I think you're going to lose people big time. But pocket sparingly, if that answers your question, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that approach, you will be successful.
I hope so.
I'll pause there for any closing comments from or questions from the audience. Zach,
if I can just real quick, you've tried to do a good job of kind of pulling out the significance of what Zach has committed his, at least his military professional career to. And I appreciate you trying to do that. I think to most of the world, we kind of see some of these things in movies and we read books about them. And being confronted with the guy who went into harm's way, the way that Zach did, and placed his life in the hands of those that he was with, and assumed a leadership role in that relationship, in the delivery of special forces operators that were doing missions that only a few people in this world can actually complete and do it effectively, and often do it with a priority of not taking life, of a priority of executing a mission without causing harm to anyone. There's skill sets that are developed as you kind of work through that internal growth process and professional growth process and expertise that are wholly unique. And will serve, Zach, will serve you well in your civilian career. David's spot on. There is a transition that's got to happen, because you do have to kind of understand that the civilian world is not the same. But the skill sets that you've developed will serve you incredibly well in your professional career. I'm proud to sit and listen to you here. I'm appreciative of what you've done for our country. And as a business owner, I want to do everything that I can to help support you in that transition, because our country's civilian marketplace needs in its boardrooms the diversity of mindset and thinking that you offer to that C-suite dialogue. So thank you, and I wish you nothing but the best. I'll pass it back to you so that you can close it, Will, but I just wanted to say that before everybody starts jumping off.
Thank you, Cal. I appreciate it. And Zach, to the friends in our audience, we hope that this Patriot Lunch has afforded you a really unique, intimate opportunity to dialogue as a small group with an accomplished veteran who's going to go make an impact and bring value to corporations, once he transitions out. Zach freely chose to dedicate his life. He's willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice to serve our nation, to serve to defend our freedom. And so for that, we are eternally grateful. Thank you, Zach, for that.
Appreciate the opportunity to share my story with you guys. It's an honor. Thank you.
I'll follow this up with a replay link so that you and his contact info so that you have an opportunity to connect. I'd love for each and every person in the audience to spend a half an hour on the phone with Zach as he gets to learn about you and your role, and vice versa. That I feel is a really, really good way to help him transition. Stay tuned for the emails about our next Patriot Lunch in mid-July. I'd ask you to forward that out to your network. Invite your company, invite your veterans ERG, ultimately to be able to share the good news of these veterans entering your workforce, and as well as Bancroft continues to enact and to support our mission. So with that, I hope you had a great time, and I look forward to seeing you in July.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
job.